Hey, welcome back to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans. From the West Coast, I'm your host, Zach Moore. Today is Saturday, February 15th, 2025. A belated happy Valentine's Day to all of you if you celebrate that sort of thing. And thank you for joining me while I talk to myself about the prospects for the Ohio State starting defense in 2025. Let's start with the big news that Ryan Day has reportedly found his next defensive coordinator in longtime New England Patriot assistant and coordinator Matt Patricia. Now, at the age of 50, Patricia spent 16 seasons in New England as either an assistant or a coordinator under Bill Belichick. Patricia was the defensive play caller for the Patriots from 2009 to 2017. And New England had top 10 scoring defenses in 8 of those 9 seasons and played in 4 Super Bowls during that span, winning 2 of those. Patricia's success as a coordinator earned him a head coaching opportunity for the Lions in Detroit from 2018 to 2020, where, quite frankly, things did not go well. Patricia went 13, 29, and 1 in 3 seasons before being fired. He returned to New England for 2 seasons in 2021 and 2022 as a senior defensive advisor. He then spent the 2023 season in Philadelphia as a senior defensive assistant, where he was actually elevated to interim defensive coordinator for 5 games after the Eagles fired their sitting defensive coordinator in December of that season. Patricia took a gap year in 2024. He did not work anywhere, and he has actually not been a coach in the college ranks since he was a grad assistant at Syracuse in 2003. Now, suffice to say, the addition of Patricia is a polarizing choice by Ryan Day. Many of the people whose opinions I listen to, like Bill Landis, are not big fans of this move. Landis and many of the other critics question whether Patricia's success in New England was his own doing, or if it was the fact that he was coaching under the greatest defensive mind in NFL history, Bill Belichick. The skeptics will say that Patricia was simply taking orders from Belichick in New England. They will point to Patricia's failed stint in Detroit as evidence that without Belichick, the culture and the structure of New England, Patricia has proved to be, quite frankly, not much of a coach. Others are concerned that Patricia went several NFL hiring cycles after his failed stint in Detroit without any offers to be a defensive coordinator elsewhere. Maybe that means something. Maybe it doesn't. There is also a sexual assault allegation against Patricia from 1996 before he began his coaching career that some folks are concerned about. Now, I'm not here to make light of something like that, but that was almost 30 years ago, and no formal charges were brought against Patricia, and I don't believe he's had any off-the-field issues since. Now, I had said on our last pod that I really wanted a seasoned coordinator for the defensive side of the ball because with all the youth in the offensive coaching staff, Ryan Day will likely have to focus most of his time and energy on the offense in 2025. I think that is a reasonable assumption. And my view of it is, look, if we weigh Patricia's entire body of work, I think there is still far more to like than to criticize. I have a very hard time believing that the greatest NFL coach of all time, leading the greatest NFL dynasty of all time, would keep Patricia on his staff for 14 consecutive seasons and allow him to call plays for 4 different Super Bowl teams if Patricia wasn't any good. I'm pretty sure competing for championships at the highest level just doesn't work like that. You have to have excellent coaches around you to compete at that level for that long. And I don't put much stock into Patricia's failed stint as a head coach in Detroit. He's not coming to Columbus to run the program. We already have a great head coach in Columbus and a winning culture. And besides, failure as a head coach in the NFL is not an indicator of success at the college level. I mean, just ask Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, and Chip Kelly about that. I personally love this hire. I love what it says about Day's commitment to being innovative and competing at the highest level. Patricia is going to replace Jim Knowles as that, mad scientist, the schemer who's going to go into a lab each week and come out with a great defensive game plan. Like Knowles, he's unlikely to contribute much to recruiting, but Ohio State has a very strong group of position coaches to handle that. Now, Ohio State has yet to officially announce Patricia's hiring, and the terms of his agreement have not yet been released. My guess is that it's probably 3 years, the contract, and he's probably not going to be in Columbus that long. I expect that, like Chip Kelly, Patricia will be in Columbus long enough to rehabilitate his image and then return to the NFL as a coordinator, and that's fine by me. I mean, look, this is the cost of doing business when you're competing for championships every season. Coordinators will come and go, and you just have to do your best to swing for the fences when there are vacancies. And to me, that looks like what Ryan Day has done here by hiring Patricia. I think many of the key ingredients are there for Patricia to have an excellent first season at Ohio State. Again, it might be his only season there. He's going to be working with a very strong defensive staff, as we know. Tim Walton, who, by the way, was just promoted to co-DC, and Matt Guerreri, who was just elevated to passing game coordinator. By the way, they'll both continue to coach their respective position groups of cornerbacks and safeties. You also have James Laurinaitis on that staff, and of course, Larry Johnson, though Jeremy Birmingham did wonder aloud earlier this week if Patricia's arrival might impact Johnson's plans. Johnson's retirement has been rumored for years. He's getting up there. He's well north of 70 years old now. And we remember he had a very public feud with Patricia's predecessor, Jim Knowles. But at least for now, our belief is that Johnson will come back for at least one more season in 2025. And Patricia, look, he's going to inherit some really, really good personnel on defense. And that leads me into what I'd like to talk about next, which is the starting 11 on defense for 2025. Now, the boilerplate take on the 2025 defense is that Ohio State is going to take a significant step back on that side of the ball this season. I understand why that view is out there. The Buckeyes lose 8 of 11 starters from the 2024 defense, which include their leading tackler in Cody Simon, their 2 leaders in pressures and quarterback sacks in JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer. Tuimoloau and Sawyer combined for 115 pressures and 21.5 sacks last season. Tuimoloau actually led the Big Ten in sacks this season with 12.5, and he finished second in the conference behind Abdul Carter in tackles for loss with 21.5. So those are very big losses for this defense. The Buckeyes will also have to replace 2 very disruptive defensive tackles in Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton. I thought Williams took his game to another level in the playoffs and was an absolute menace, game wrecker on the interior for the Buckeyes during the CFP. Finally, the secondary will lose 3 highly productive, very experienced defensive backs in Denzel Burke, who was a 4-year starter, Lathan Ransom, who was a 3-year starter, and Jordan Hancock, a 2-year starter. It was Hancock's versatility logging snaps at free safety during the playoffs that allowed Caleb Downs to play closer to the line of scrimmage, which made the defense very, very difficult to move the ball on. And of course, Hancock made plenty of plays in his own right. He is going to be a very, difficult player to replace. Look, all 8 of those players are huge losses, both in production and veteran leadership. And I suspect all 8 will be drafted in April's NFL draft. At any other program, losing that many great players would likely mean a major step back. And look, there is nowhere to go but down from number 1, right? The Buckeyes led the country in total defense, defensive yards per play, scoring defense, and stop rate. So it's a reasonable assumption that there will be a step back. But I think that step back is going to be something like, top 10, maybe top 15 nationally, which is still very, very good and should be plenty good enough for the Buckeyes to make another run to the college football playoff, especially with what we expect Ohio State is going to have on offense this season. Now, I think the strength of the 2025 defense will be the back 7, clearly. Caleb Downs at safety is going to be the anchor of the defense. He will be arguably the best defensive player in college football. Downs led the defense in snaps last season with 917. He never came off the field. He had the ultimate trust of the coaching staff. And his PFF grades are just stupid. 87.9 overall, 86.4 against the run, 80.6 in tackling, 78.3 in pass rush, and 85 in coverage. He literally does everything well. 81 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 6 PBUs, 2 picks, and we remember he returned a punt for a touchdown in a big moment against Indiana to break that game open. Davison Igbinosun and Jermaine Matthews would seem to have their starting spots locked up at cornerback this coming season. By the way, I consider Matthews a returning starter, given that he played 137 snaps in the playoffs. You play that much in games of those stakes against those types of opponents, you're a returning starter in my book. Now, Igbinosun, as we know, has some major work to do this offseason to eliminate penalties. He was the most penalized defensive player in the FBS with a staggering 16 penalties. But he has all the physical tools to be a great corner: size, speed, and physicality. I remember seeing Igbinosun for the first time in person in the 2023 season opener, and I couldn't believe what I was looking at. Man, he is a freakish looking athlete. Just, again, length, size, speed. He is excellent against the run with a PFF grade of 82.4. He is an excellent tackler. He finished with a PFF grade of 77.3 for tackling. And, he very rarely gets torched in coverage. He is almost always like right there in the receiver's jersey, but he has trouble with making illegal contact once the ball is in the air. Now, Igbinosun only committed 6 penalties in 2023, and he only had 3 in 2022 when he was at Ole Miss. To me, this looks like something that could be coached out of him, right? And it is also worth noting that Igbinosun was one of only 5 Buckeyes that logged over 800 defensive snaps last season. And to me, that says that the coaching staff still really values what he brings to the table and really trusts him despite the penalties. Now, my money is on Jalen McClain to replace Lathan Ransom. McClain was only a freshman last season. He logged 107 snaps and graded out extremely well, according to PFF, with an overall grade of 81.1. He had a coverage grade of 82, a tackling grade of 79.1, and a run defense grade of 75.1. Those are excellent PFF grades. Now, granted, small sample size, 107 snaps, but those are excellent grades across the board. And, at his age, true freshman, he's another player who's only going to get better. Junior Malik Hartford is also a player to watch. He could be a factor at this spot as well. But I think McClain at this stage is the front runner to win this job. And I understand there's a long way to go before the season opener on August 30th. You got spring practices. You got a whole month of fall practices. But in my mind, McClain is the next man up here to replace Lathan Ransom. Now, I think probably the biggest question in the secondary is who will replace Jordan Hancock. Hancock's versatility, I mentioned earlier, it's so valuable. It allowed Caleb Downs to play closer to the line of scrimmage. He made a ton of plays all over the field in the various spots that he played in the secondary. And look, I don't think Ohio State really has a replacement for him for everything that he can do, all the different positions he can play. Now, I've seen a few projections that have Lorenzo Styles Jr. stepping into this spot as a starter. Styles played 162 snaps last season, but the bulk of those snaps were played during the middle of the season. And his snaps really tapered off toward the end of the year. He only played 26 snaps in the playoffs, and he finished the season with the defense's worst PFF grade for coverage of 48.4. I'm sure the coaching staff likes his experience. He's going to be a senior, but I just think there are too many other much more talented options than Styles for this spot. You have Aaron Scott Jr., you have Bryce West, you have the incoming freshman phenom Devin Sanchez. Now, many are saying that Sanchez is the cornerback equivalent of Jeremiah Smith as a prospect, and from what I'm hearing and reading, Sanchez is going to be a day one starter somewhere in this secondary in 2025. I heard an interesting idea from Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis on the Kings of Columbus podcast earlier this week, which was the possibility of moving Davison Igbinosun into the slot, into the position that Jordan Hancock played. The thinking there is that, the coaching staff would be able to take greater advantage of Igbinosun's physicality, playing him closer to the line of scrimmage. Maybe he's a little less of a liability in coverage with those penalties from that spot, but that would also allow Devin Sanchez to play on the outside at corner, assuming, of course, he's as good as advertised as a true freshman. I think the good news here for Tim Walton and Matt Guerrieri is there's no shortage of talented options in the secondary, and it'll be very interesting to see which one of these young players emerge in spring and fall practices. Now, I expect Ohio State to be as good at linebacker as any program in the country, and that's a bold statement, considering that room just lost an excellent player in Cody Simon, who led them in tackles last season. But look, Sonny Styles is back. He finished second to Simon in tackles with 100 last season. That included 10.5 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, 5 PBUs, and 1 forced fumble. And remember, folks, 2024 was the first season Styles played linebacker in his career. And he did all that. Not too shabby. He finished 2024 with a solid overall PFF grade of 71.4, a very good pass rush grade of 75.6 as well, and he's only going to get better. Now, Arvell Reese is going to step into the Mike linebacker role for Cody Simon. Like Styles, Reese was playing a new position last season after playing defensive end in 2023, and he did not disappoint. At 6'4", 238 pounds, Reese finished 2024 with an overall PFF grade and rush defense grade of 76.4 and a pass rush grade of 80.4. In 309 snaps, Reese had 43 tackles and 3.5 tackles for loss. Reese and Styles are both 6'4", 235 plus, who can run sideline to sideline, and both are very impactful pass rushers as well. I could not be more bullish on this duo in 2025, and I think they give Matt Patricia all kinds of options in terms of how he can attack an offense next season. So I'm very excited about that duo in 2025. Now, I'm assuming that Larry Johnson is going to return for the 2025 season. And if that happens, that almost guarantees Ohio State will use a four-man defensive front, which is, as we know, a Larry Johnson staple. And I'm personally very comfortable with a starting front four of Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry at defensive end, and Caden McDonald and Edric Houston in the middle. Jackson and Curry are both seniors now who have played a lot of high-leverage snaps for this defense. Jackson played 316 snaps last season, including 78 during the playoffs. He finished the season with 17 quarterback pressures, 1.5 sacks, and 3.5 tackles for loss. He had a solid overall PFF grade of 70.5 and a pass rush grade of 67.8. Now, he left a little something to be desired in tackling. According to PFF, he finished with a tackling grade of 37.7, so he's got some work to do this offseason in that department. But at 6'6", 260, I'm looking forward to what Jackson can do with, starter-level snaps, 600 snaps or so this season. Now, Caden Curry logged 231 snaps last season, including 41 in the playoffs. And I thought he was actually a more impactful player than Jackson, but with fewer snaps. Curry finished 2024 with 13 quarterback pressures, 2.5 sacks, 3.5 tackles for loss, and 2 forced fumbles. And across the board, his PFF grades are a little better than Jackson's. Curry finished 2024 with an overall PFF grade of 71.9, a pass rush grade of 67.2, and a rush defense grade of 71.9. He also had a very solid tackling grade of 75.4. I think Curry has the best motor of any defensive end on this roster. He's relentless. I love his energy. You feel his presence as soon as he steps on the field. He also was a high-impact player on special teams last season. I think Curry and Jack's going to make a very good duo at defensive end for this defensive line. Now, I thought Edric Houston had a really good freshman season, emerging as Tyleik Williams' backup by the end of the season at the 3-tech. Houston, along with Jeremiah Smith, headlined the 2024 freshman class, and he was a player Ryan Day had to fight until the very end to keep in that class. He logged 141 snaps last season, but 55 of those came in the playoffs. He played a lot. Houston did a lot of high-leverage snaps in the playoffs. He logged double-digit snaps in every playoff game. He finished 2024 with an overall PFF grade of 75, an excellent rush defense grade of 79.1, and a solid pass rush grade of 69.6. And his PFF grades improved last season as the competition got tougher. And again, folks, he was only a true freshman. He is only going to get better. I am very bullish on Edric Houston at the 3-tech next season. And I'm equally bullish on Caden McDonald at nose tackle. McDonald logged 216 snaps last season, including 35 in the playoffs. He had a huge role, as we remember, in the fourth quarter goal line stop against Penn State that helped the Buckeyes steal that game in Happy Valley last season. At 6'3", 326, McDonald finished 2024 with a solid overall PFF grade of 68.7 and a really good rush defense grade of 74.1. McDonald is also a very young player, just a true sophomore last season, and he, like Edric Houston, is only going to get better. I think in Jackson, Curry, Houston, and McDonald, I think that is a very good starting front four with a lot of upside. Now, according to 24/7 Sports, Jackson and Curry were high 4-stars in the 2022 class. Jackson was the number 98 overall player. Curry was the number 141 overall player in that class. Ditto for Caden McDonald, also very talented. He was the number 136 overall player in the 2023 class. And Edric Houston, 5-star, he was the number 33 overall player in his class 2024. There is a lot of talent in this group, folks. clearly. And they logged a lot of high leverage snaps last season and in the college football playoff. Another player I'm very curious about is defensive end Logan George, the Idaho State transfer who was just added to the roster in December. We'll see if George's game will translate from the FCS to Big Ten football. I can't imagine he'd be in Columbus if it didn't. George had a staggering 19.5 tackles for loss for Idaho State last season. At 6'4", 260, George played in a 3-man front for the Vandals last season, but he has the versatility to play in a 4-man front as well. He has 2 seasons of eligibility left. I think he's going to be a high-impact player for the defensive line as well. Now, there is a conversation for another day to be had about the depth on the defensive side of the ball, the defensive line in particular. I think if there's an area of legitimate concern for the 2025 defense, it's what happens if there are multiple injuries along the starting defensive line. Because at this point, I'm not sure there are a lot of clear answers at either defensive end or defensive tackle right now, if God forbid, injuries are a major factor next season. And, look, the reality is we've seen injuries take their toll on Ohio State in recent seasons. Okay, that's going to do it for me. Look for another pod from me and possibly Paige and Chad delving into more off-season stuff for your national champion Ohio State Buckeyes. Until then, thanks so much for listening, and go Bucks. You've been listening to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast. Follow us on X at South_Stands.